some games that are great. I'd rather let the people know about the underrated classics of old than bitching cause about shitty games like it's been done a million times before. 'Cause he's the happiest gamer you've never heard. He's the happy Nintendo nerd. He's the happy Atari Sega nerd. He's the happy video game nerd.
Before Manhunt, or The Suffering, Carnival, Shadow Man, Nightmare Creatures, Loaded, Blood, Mortal Kombat, or Doom, there was Splatterhouse. Arguably the first good violent horror-themed video game. Not the first, but the first good. In 1988, Namco made video game history when Splatterhouse was unleashed into the arcades. It spawned one port, two incredible sequels, and a spin-off. Splatterhouse was dark. Splatterhouse was violent. Splatterhouse was graphic, gory, and bloody. Splatterhouse was an amazing video game series that has not received the credit it deserves. It is without question one of the most criminally underrated video game series ever. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute pleasure to bring to you a retrospective of one of my all-time favorite video game series, Splatterhouse. The hero of Splatterhouse is Rick, one of the hardest badasses of all video games. Rick will stop at nothing, and I mean nothing, to rescue his loved ones from the clutches of evil. Look at this, prime example. When a knife is thrown at Rick, what does he do? Fucking punches it, that's what. I mean, when was the last time you punched a knife, fist to blade, and it was the knife that lost? Yeah, that's never happened, because you ain't as badass as Rick. Rick will fuck you up. But what makes him such a badass is his mask. Sometimes referred to as the Terror Mask, or just simply the Mask. This ancient Mayan relic gives Rick the superhuman strength he needs to save his loved ones. But is this mask a blessing or a curse? And this is a good time to point out that Splatterhouse does pay homage to a lot of horror movies, most notably Friday the 13th. The Terror Mask is white throughout all the games, with the exception of the American TurboGrafx port where it was red. The mask started off rather plain looking, more like a hockey mask, but as the series progressed, it was reshaped to resemble more of a skull. But this doesn't really cover up the obvious influence of Jason Voorhees' signature look. Other references include Evil Dead 2, The Deadly Spawn, and Poltergeist. My point is, Splatterhouse is a game made for horror fans, by horror fans. There are 4 games in the Splatterhouse series. Part 1 came out in the arcade in 1988 and was ported to the TurboGrafx and PC Engine 2 years later. Parts 2 and 3 came out on the Sega Genesis in 1992 and 93 respectively. And this cutesy SD spin-off Wampaku Graffiti was released only in Japan for the Famicom. This chibi Japanese exclusive is more of a quirky side story, and in the interest of keeping things focused, this video will only stick to the main 3 games. Though I will recommend it to importers. Alright, let's get started. According to the instruction book, Rick and Jennifer are parapsychology majors. Because I guess parapsychology also means paranormal, they went to visit Dr. West, a famous parapsychologist's mansion, which had been given the nickname the Splatterhouse. However, when they arrive, Rick is knocked unconscious by some unseen assailant and is left for dead, while Jennifer is captured. But none of this is actually covered in either version of the game. I mean, in the arcade, there was a little movie in the beginning showing the mask floating above Rick's dead body and then attaching itself to his face. So I guess that kind of explains where the mask came from, but this is all left out of the TurboGrafx version. It's completely open, and that really frustrated me, but we'll get to that later. As you can see, Splatterhouse is a stripped-down 2D beat-em-up. And this may appear a little primitive, and it is, but you say primitive, I say classic, because Namco mixes things up and keeps things from really feeling stale. There's danger coming at you not just from in front of you, but from the background, from the floor, and flying above you. The level design's always new and fresh, and this one can be tough. You rarely have any time to really breathe. And some levels have a less linear approach where you can choose your own path, though all paths lead to the same boss. And the boss battles are always a new challenge. They start out kinda easy and quickly get hard. There's always a new surprise waiting for you at the end of each level. One of the really unique things the first Splatterhouse brought to the table was the creative use of weapons. Look at that! Classic! It ain't called Splatterhouse for nothing, folks. And really, When was the last time you saw a game this old use a shotgun with such brutal realism? That's video game history. Now, you can't talk about the TurboGrafx port of Splatterhouse without talking about the differences between it and the arcade. Most notable are the color of the mask and the 4th level boss. In the arcade version, you fight a flying inverted cross in a church. And in the TurboGrafx version, you fight another evil mask in some vacant hallway. The funny thing is, in both versions, a church hymn is played after you defeat the boss. But in the TurboGrafx version, all the religious imagery was taken out, so the song makes no sense. Other things include an altogether more toned-down experience, but I don't think this had much to do with censorship, but hardware limitations. The TurboGrafx 16 really wasn't that powerful, and as a result, we lost a lot of nice, gory level decorations and extra animations. But the gameplay was left completely intact, so this is only a minor gripe. The highlight of the first game, and maybe this series, is a boss fight you encounter towards the end of the game. You finally find your girlfriend, but only to discover that she's mutated into some horrible bloodthirsty monster. And now it's you or her. Somebody's going to die. Either Jennifer kills her boyfriend, or Rick kills his girlfriend. Wow. That's fucked up. That is cruel, disturbing, vile, and great fucking storytelling. No, I'm serious. This goes down on my list as like one of the best video game plot twists ever. And the creepiest thing is hearing Jennifer say, during her last few fleeting moments when she reverts back to human, she doesn't want to kill you. That's not her choice anymore. And it's moments like these that make you fall in love with these games, as there's disturbing little twists throughout the entire series, especially in the third one. But that's one of the best things about Splatterhouse. It has a great story, and that's not something that can be said about most games, even today. But this ends up being one of my biggest gripes of this game. There wasn't much of it. The potential for a great story was so grand that I was disappointed when I wasn't given one. Like, what the fuck is actually going on here? What happened to Jennifer? And after, what happened to Rick? And the mask? How did Rick find the mask? Or I guess more accurately, how or why did the mask find Rick? And what's going on with this house? Why is all this crazy shit happening? Is it possessed? Or is it the product of some misguided science? I mean, I don't normally complain about an old school game having a lack of story, but this one would have benefited so much by having a fully realized narrative. And we never really get all the answers either. But this is a problem that was addressed in the sequels. Speaking of which,